sprinkling of water, and bathing in the Eleusis, singing and dancing. They may have acted out parts of the chore's life, parts of the Homeric hymn to Demeter, and the story of Dionysus. No exact details can be discerned, and we can be sure of only one fact: they served as a preliminary exercise aiming at a complete purification of the candidate. One thing which can be known for sure is that at the time of Demetrius, the lesser mysteries were practiced in the month Anthesterion. The Macedonian god-king demanded initiation in Munichion. In order to accommodate him, the Athenians voted Munichion into Anthesterion, and he was initiated. The greater mysteries took place over 9 days. This was not a simple ceremony requiring only the presence of a priest. It was a very involved festival. The first 5 days were spent in preparation for the 6th and 7th. Day 1 consisted of celebrations and speeches in Athens. Day 2 found initiates washing in the sea and sacrificing to rid themselves of impurity. Day 3 was a day of public sacrifice. Day 4 was a repeat of purification rites in honor of Asclepios, who had arrived late and wished to be initiated. On day 5, the initiates and the officiators in the mystery festivals held a grand procession to Eleusis, a journey of some 14 miles. The participants wore sacred clothing, carried certain artifacts, and followed ancient formulas whose beginnings have long been lost. This grand procession was halted only once in the history of the mysteries, and that when word came of the destruction of Thebes by Alexander. The 6th day was spent in fasting and purification in preparation for that night. It was on the 6th night that the most significant portions of the rites took place. Then the ceremony really began, and the initiates apparently went through certain experiences which left them perhaps filled with awe and even confusion, but also overflowing with bliss and joy. Following a 2nd day rest and preparation, the 7th night included the highest portions of the rites. The 8th day held libations and the other rites for the dead, and the 9th found the participants returning to Athens. The 6th and 7th nights of this festival held the greatest importance for initiates. These rites consisted probably of 3 parts: the dromina, dicnymena, and legomena. The dromina was most likely a ritual acting out portions of the story of Demeter, a sort of sacred theater. The legomena were teachings which probably accompanied the dromina. The dicnymena involved the showing of sacred objects, most importantly, the hiera. The high priest of these mysteries, the hierophant, had that responsibility. These objects were kept in the innermost portion of the holiest chamber at Eleusis until that one moment and could be accessed by no one else. Their identity was successfully kept secret to the present day. A 4th part of the rites was reserved only for those who wished a higher degree of knowledge. This portion, the epopteia, remains shrouded in complete mystery. Foucault and others suggest that these were rites for Dionysus. Karenyi asserts that in the highest moment of the ceremony, the Chore herself was revealed in fire, while the Hierophant proclaimed that she, Queen of the Dead, had given birth to a son. Whatever happened, the effect the epopteia had on initiates was profound. The hymn to Demeter exclaimed explicitly, "Whoever on this earth has seen these is blessed," the implication being that he will have a better lot in the afterlife. Karenyi wrote that the initiates discovered that a birth in death was possible, and it was possible also for human beings if they had faith in the goddess. That is the message which Demeter herself proclaimed at Eleusis when she laid Demophoon in the fire to make him immortal. Milonus wisely advised, "Let us recall again that the rites of Eleusis were held for some 2,000 years, that for 2,000 years civilized humanity was sustained and ennobled by those rites." This grand festival, with all its sacred rituals and secrets, was demanded by Demetrius. He was granted not only initiation into the greater mysteries immediately, again by a vote which changed the month to Boedromion, but was directly initiated into the epopteia, which was normally reserved for those who had been through the dromina, legomena, and dicnymena a full year earlier. What should be made of these great honors? It is true that in Demetrius's liberating of Athens, the city merely fell to another ruler. He was known as Demetrios Poliorketes, besieger of cities, and Athens fell to him more than once. These honors were at first freely given, however, when he had ostensibly returned to the city her ancient form of government. It was upon restoring Athenian democracy that he was hailed as a god-king. Perhaps praise was sincere at the beginning. At least in Plutarch's account, it is clear that Athens acted out of fear after his second liberation of the city. They certainly did not raise 250 talents for soap out of genuine devotion. Gruen pointed out that both Antigonus and Demetrios propagandistically proclaimed their intention to liberate all Greece. He wrote, "Demetrios, carrying on the propaganda of his father, milked it for all it was worth. The renewed and lengthy conflict against Cassander saw its use again and again." Of course, liberation of towns from Cassander's garrisons was perfectly consistent with the installation of Demetrius's own garrisons for the protection of the liberated. That practice in no way compromised the propaganda, whatever the freed communities may have thought. Indeed, freed cities came immediately under the control of Demetrius. This control was religious as much as military. Demetrius was hailed as a god by the Athenians, treated as one, and permitted, however begrudgingly, to live in the temple and call Athena his sister. He was also, very importantly, hailed as Dionysus when he approached the city. Dionysus had long been associated with Athens, of course, but he was particularly associated with Demeter and the Eleusinian Mysteries. In fact, if Athena was the patron goddess of Athens, Dionysus, Demeter, and Persephone were the most important deities behind her. Karenyi wrote of a divine triad, Demeter, Kore, and Dionysus, who belong inseparably together. In seeking such divine glories, Demetrius can certainly be associated with contemporary and later Hellenistic kings. In fact, Kenneth Scott wrote, "In many ways, this phase of Demetrius's history is essential to the understanding of the whole development of the cult of kings and emperors." Demetrius sought divine status. This divine status was important in the classical and Hellenistic world for the domination and ruling of Athens and its surrounding. Both his residency in the Parthenon and his participation in the rites at Eleusis were symbolic of domination of Greece. Both of these sites were dominant of a large area and had in the past been repositories for the offerings, tributes, and respect of city-states in the region. By ruling them, entering them, and associating himself with the divine powers of them, Demetrius established himself as lord of all Athenian influence, ancient and contemporary. It must be remembered that the Parthenon was the repository for the funds of the so-called Delian League. It was built at least partially with funding from the League treasury and then housed its monies thereafter during the time when the League was the de facto Athenian empire. To live within this treasure house was symbolic enough, but mention must also be made of the Panathenaea, the great Athenian religious festival which culminated on the Acropolis. Of it, Zeidman wrote, "This spectacle was aimed as much at the rest of the Athenian people as at the allied representatives present and the Greek world at large." Jennifer Niels wrote, "Also present in the procession in the especially grand celebration of every 4 years were representatives of Athens' subjects in the Arche, ordered to participate and to bring a cow and panoply to dedicate to the goddess. As they reached the Acropolis, they would have seen from 454 BC on the huge stelae recording the lists of their enforced dedications to Athena, striking visual testimony of their subjects' status. This grand procession then marked the subservience to the Athenian state and more importantly to Athena. Writing of this phenomenon, Niels remarked, land sacred to Athena was rented out for revenue to the state of Athens. Thus, Athena was a landlord and a presence in the Arche." Thus it can be seen that Demetrius, by his residence in the Parthenon and his inclusion so irregularly into the Eleusinian Mysteries, asserted his godhood and his influence over the Athenian world. Athens may not have led the Athenian empire when he liberated her from Cassander, but his symbolic residence with her patron goddess and his forcible inclusion with her other closely associated deities was terribly significant. He was declaring himself to have godlike influence. His influence extended over Athens and the Greek world, which he and his father had declared they would free. It has already been remarked that he was one of the first of the Hellenistic kings, one of the first to accept and procure the trappings of immortality while still in the flesh. I submit that his actions in these two instances were intended to show his dominance over the old Athenian world.